Let's just get started now. Thank you so much. I know this is a valuable lunch time, and you guys are, either already had lunch or, sacrificing your lunch time to listen to this presentation. This is super awesome, and if you're at the right place, if you're wanting to know how to migrate from Iceberg to Delta Lake. And today, we're going to talk about two very simple commands, and just with very two simple commands and 7 keywords, you're able to do fast trial and migration from Iceberg to Delta Lake. Shallow clone and convert to Delta. My name is Emma Liu. I'm a product manager here at Databricks working on Delta Lake. Prior to Databricks, I worked at 3 other database companies. And here's Ming.
Hi, my name is Ming. I'm a software engineer in Databricks. My experience focuses on the data analytic infra. I'm currently working on the Delta ingestion team.
Awesome. OK. What are these numbers? 150 billion real-time requests, 32 billion customer profiles, 24 trillion segment evaluations per day. Any guess? Any guess? OK. Huh? Oh, wow. You actually are pretty close to it. You might have watched last year's keynote very carefully. This is actually the origin story of our Iceberg to Delta converter. About 2 years ago, we helped Adobe to move petabytes of data from Iceberg to Delta. And in this process, we helped them to co-development doing POC in many different areas. And Iceberg to Delta converter is actually one of the projects that we co-developed with Adobe. And last year, the VP of data engineering from Adobe actually delivered the keynotes talking about their journey into the lakehouse. And they tried to use Iceberg for years and required lots of customizations for their at-scale customer experience platform. And one of the key features that's mentioned in the keynote is the change data feed, which in Delta Lake that allowed for incremental processing. And these are the key workloads from customer experience platform that really the lakehouse enabled by Delta Lake actually helped them optimize and battle test it in production environments. So I would encourage you to check out the session at 2:30 today. There's another Adobe session by their team and talking about after 1 year in production, what's their experience. OK, so also a sneak peek into tomorrow's keynote, a quick update on the Delta Lake. It's super scalable, fast. We've been becoming the most popular open storage format downloads. And it's being battle tested, and more than 10,000 companies have been using Delta Lake in production. Of course, we're super grateful that the Delta Lake community has contributed so much to pushing the product forward and the ecosystem forward. And we're innovating at very fast speed, 80+ features every year. And one of the continuous innovation in Delta Lake that's actually mentioned by Ali in the morning keynote is we're introducing uniform, the universal format. What it means is we're supporting Iceberg and Hudi and combining the best of all 3 worlds, right? Once you choose to come to Delta Lake, you are actually getting benefits of all 3 worlds. And so this is another reason that you should think about moving your primary data storage format to Delta Lake. And what it means for uniform is once you store it as a Delta table, it can be read from and written to as if it was an Iceberg table. And this is a milestone 1 for our uniform project. And also a quick plug for tomorrow's keynote by Michael Armbrust. We're going to depth into the new features that we're introducing. And there's also deep dive sessions. OK, now let's just keep laser focused on how do I actually migrate to Delta Lake when I have an existing Iceberg table. In 2.3.0 release, we released 2 key features here in the Delta open source release. One is the convert to Delta from Iceberg tables. And this is a 0 copy in-place conversion tool. And it was already working for Parquet to Delta table with the convert to Delta. And in 2.3.0, we added the path from Iceberg to Delta with convert to Delta. And the second key feature is shallow clone. Shallow clone is actually a pretty unique feature in Delta Lake. It started with you can shallow clone from a Delta table to another Delta table. And you're sharing the data files underneath, and you're just creating another Delta table reference on top, metadata on top, so that you can have multiple Delta tables that are referencing the same set of the data files. And it also works for if the source is Parquet table. And of course, today the focus is we also released the Iceberg table as the source table. And you can actually have a target shallow clone Delta table. Now, let's look at the use case, right? The 2 simple commands and 7 keywords that I mentioned. First, the final goal is convert to Delta in this migration journey. So these are the 3 keywords that you need to remember. Convert to Delta with the Iceberg path. And how do you use it, right? This is actually a one Iceberg table to another Delta table. And this is a one-time conversion process, and it's in place. You're not copying the data files when you're doing this convert. You're just creating another Delta metadata layer on top. And you can definitely use it in a test scenario, test Iceberg tables. Or when you decide you're doing the final conversion, this is the command to use, just convert to Delta. The reason I'm talking about the test or the final conversion is once you use this convert to Delta command, the Iceberg table is no longer, should not be used in production anymore. So this is the final step, right? And okay, many users then actually come to us to ask this question. Okay, I cannot really achieve my migration all at once, right? I need some, a month or 2 months that I might have the Iceberg table still in production. How do I deal with this type of migration period? Then we came up with shallow clone. Shallow clone is the saver. So shallow clone, we actually extended this feature for shallow clone. As I mentioned, it was designed from Delta to Delta. It was already there in the product. But for this scenario, we actually thought about, okay, we can extend from Iceberg to Delta as well and creating a shallow clone Delta tables on top. And one of the benefits is you can have one Iceberg table and have multiple Delta tables as the shallow clone table. And in this case, you're not destroying the in production Iceberg tables. You can just leverage the shallow clone Delta tables to do experiments and test out Delta Lake features. And these Delta tables are meant to be short-term trials and testing. And the command is also very simple. Just create table and with a shallow clone keyword. And you can use the path-based or by a table identifier in this command. And as I mentioned, shallow clone is an optional step that if you want to have this testing period, right, and you can use shallow clone to test out Delta tables in multiple use cases. Okay. I want to just use an analogy, Ming and branch, in kind of a GitHub environment, right, to distinguish these 2 commands for you. First, let's look at convert to Delta. And this is pretty much similar to, okay, you have originally have an Iceberg table, and that's your main. And once you have the convert to Delta, the main becomes Delta, and you should not use Iceberg in production anymore. So this is convert to Delta. And in comparison, for shallow clone, the main Iceberg table still exists and continues to evolve. And you can create multiple branches from different time points to be the Delta tables for your testing environment. And these are kind of the branch kind of concept there, right? And in both cases, you're not copying data files. We're just creating additional references and metadata. Okay. And use these 2 together. First, you can use shallow clone in your migration phase. You can test out the Delta tables created from Iceberg in different scenarios. And then, at the time that you decide I'm committed to change to Delta, you use the convert to Delta. And the Iceberg in production, you should not use that table anymore. Okay, now, as I mentioned, the shallow clone is an optional step. You don't have to use it if you already are committed to just use convert to delta. Now you might have a question, right? Can I just use shallow clone forever, these tables forever? One of the things is Iceberg and delta tables are still kind of in the two system. And if you're using Iceberg in production, you could be running maintenance events and vacuum events, and it might be getting rid of some of the older versions of Iceberg table. And then in this case, for example, in V1, Iceberg table, the files are deleted, then the related shallow clone delta tables could break as well, just because the data files are shared, and that's one of the reasons that you should consider using these clones in a shorter term. Of course, if you never vacuum your Iceberg table, potentially you could use it for long term. Okay. Now, quickly, I want to go into a little bit under the hood, what's in convert to delta and shallow clone. Okay. All right. This is probably pretty similar to, pretty familiar for many of you. This is the Iceberg data structure and the file layout. So you have the metadata layer and the data layer. And once you do the convert to delta, the Iceberg side, the delta side will create new metadata layer with this transaction log, and then pointing to the original data files. That's why it's in place, fast and cheap creation of Delta Lake table. And if you look at by directory view, this is the original Iceberg layout in the directory with the files, with the metadata and the data in Parquet. And once I do convert to delta, we're creating additional delta log and delta metadata directory, and it's working with data files that was originally in the Iceberg side. And we're not really deleting the Iceberg metadata, but it's just for illustration purpose that you should consider not using that in production anymore, just because the main branch is already changed from Iceberg to delta. Okay. This is the convert to delta sort of under the hood. And let's look at the shallow clone under the hood. Again, it's a very familiar structure with the Iceberg layout. And on the top, there's a Iceberg catalog. And this catalog is actually the Spark catalog, not the user-facing catalog here. You have the metadata layer and data layer. Once you do the shallow clone, this is what happens. It will create a delta metadata layer, and then also have the delta table in the delta catalog. And again, this is a Spark catalog concept, not the user-facing catalog. So again, this is a zero copy, and it's super fast that you can do these experiments. All right. Very similar. I just want to show you how the files are organized in directory. This is the Iceberg table, how it's organized. When it's doing the shallow clone, it will create another directory with the delta metadata layer. And it's pointing to the original data directory from the Iceberg side. And as one, I want to point out that once the delta tables start to evolve, the new data files will co-live with the delta side of the metadata. So that's one of the difference between shallow clone and convert to delta, how the new data files for Delta Lake will live. Okay, now I'm just going to hand to Ming to show the demo, to show how fast we can actually do this migration and trial.
Okay, great. So now we're in the demo. As Emma gave a great presentation, and here's the demo setup. As you can see, we'll use open source Spark in local to create an Iceberg table and run both shallow clone and convert to delta. So here's the environment. We are using Spark open source 3.3.2, and we are using delta open source 2.3 and Iceberg version 1.2.1. So actually the Iceberg jar here is not necessary if you only want to convert or shallow clone, but we need this Iceberg library to create Iceberg table for the demo. As you can see in the command line, we have Delta catalog as a main Spark catalog, and we plug in Iceberg catalog as a side catalog called local. So here will be the workflow of the demo. At the beginning, you will see we create Iceberg table. Then we run the shallow clone with the Iceberg catalog. After that, we will do another shallow clone with the Iceberg path. And at the end, we will do a convert to Delta. OK. So let's go to the terminal. As you can see, we have a terminal with open source Spark 3.32 here. And let's start with create Iceberg table. So by the way, I have my script on the side so that you can follow. Oh, no, not this one. Oops, I created the wrong command. Yeah, we should start from beginning. OK. So as you can see, we are creating an Iceberg table with 2 columns, and one of them is a partition column. Then we are writing some rows into the Iceberg table. OK, now we have 2 rows and 2 columns in the Iceberg table. To make the conversion more interesting, let's do some schema change to add 1 additional column. OK, we are adding a new column called flag, and it's a Boolean. Let's also write some rows with a new schema. OK, great. So now we should have 3 columns and 3 rows. Let's clear the Iceberg table. To make sure everything looks right. OK, we have 3 rows and 3 columns. And just in case, let's also check the Iceberg directory with a describe. As you can see, the provider is Iceberg. That's expected. And we know the location is temporary Iceberg table /db/table. If we go there, you can see we have both Iceberg data and metadata has been generated. There are 3 partitions, and each partition has 1 Parquet data file. And we have 4 commits in total. Well, the first one corresponds to the table creation. The second one corresponds to the first insert into. And the third one corresponds to our schema change. And the last one corresponds to our second insert into. OK, so now we have the Iceberg table in good shape, and we are ready to do shallow clone. Let's go back to the terminal. The syntax is actually pretty straightforward, as Emma just mentioned. Oh, I missed 1 parenthesis. OK, so by running this command, we actually create a delta table called clone delta table name. By copying the Iceberg table, now the clone succeeds. If you query the clone, we can see the same 3 rows here with the original Iceberg table. And if you look into the clone command in details, you will see we're actually referring the Iceberg table by the Iceberg catalog name and the DB name and the table name. Now, let's say if I don't know the catalog, I have no idea about the catalog, can I just copy over from the Iceberg path? Yes, we can do that as well. So to start with that, let's memorize the Iceberg path first. If it goes back, you can see the Iceberg path is here. Let's store it somewhere. OK, now we have the Iceberg table path. And we can do the clone with the path as well. And the syntax is actually the Iceberg keywords plus Iceberg table path. As you can see, the second clone succeeds as well. And we are creating a second clone called clone delta table path. If you query the second clone, we see the same 3 rows here, right? OK. So far, if we look at the clone command, you will see we always create a delta table by name, right? Well, the first clone command will create a delta table called cron delta table name. And the second command, we create delta table called cron delta table path. But can we just do a shallow clone from Iceberg path to delta path? That actually also works. And it has similar syntax, like how we referring to an Iceberg table by path. And here's the command. So you can actually use the delta keywords and delta table path referring to the target delta table, and you can run the command. Oh, sorry. Yeah, shadow cron. What's happened? Last solves. It's not on my side. Let's try it again. Maybe I missed a S on the beginning. Come on. Oh, I see. Yeah, sorry, there's some accident here. I forgot to clean up the directory. Okay, now it should be good. Okay, the command failed because we didn't clean up the directory. If there's something already in the directory, we won't be able to do the create because it will overwrite the existing data, right? After we clean up the directory, as you can see, now the cron command succeeds with the delta path. And we can just query the delta path through delta. We also see 3 rows, right? If you go to the path, let's clear what we have. If we go to the path, we will only see a delta log. You can see there no data has been copied over. This cron delta table actually share the existing data file belonging to the Iceberg, and we only generate delta metadata here as a shallow cron. Okay, so now that's all for shallow cron, and we can go to convert to delta. So as Emma mentioned, convert delta is a little bit different from shallow cron. Instead of create a copy elsewhere, it's actually modifying the Iceberg table in place. So due to that reason, convert to delta has to be catalog agnostic, because we cannot create a delta table in Iceberg catalog during the conversion, right? So the recommended way to do a convert to delta is always convert from Iceberg path. And here's the command. So you can see the similar syntax. We are referring to the Iceberg table by the Iceberg keywords and the Iceberg table path. As you can see, the conversion succeeds. And now you can access this path as delta format. You can see we have these 3 rows here. However, the table path is usually pretty hard to use, right? Because it's very long, and people is better to work with SQL and the table names. So don't worry about that. We can create an external table on top of the path so that you don't need to memorize the whole path. Instead, you can use the name. Okay, now we are creating external table called converted delta table on top of the path. And you can use the SQL to select from that table. Okay, so from now on, we have the original Iceberg table become a delta table. And you can perform all the normal delta operations on the table. For example, we can insert some rows into the table. Now we are writing the 4th row into the table. And you still query the path. You can see 3 rows. You can also query the external table. You also see 3 rows. So now this table becomes a delta table. So people may be curious, okay, then how the original Iceberg table path looks like? Let's go there. If you go back to the original Iceberg table path, you will see we have been create delta log there. However, this delta log has 2 transactions. Well, the first one corresponds to our initial convert to delta, and the second one corresponds to our insert into for the fourth row. If you check the next entry, you will see their new Parquet data file has been generated. This is actually generated by delta from our insert into the fourth row. Yeah, from now on, this table can be used as a delta table, and it can leverage all the existing delta features. Yeah, that's all for convert to delta, and that's all for the demo. Let me give it back to Emma.
Awesome, awesome. This is a really, really good live demo. I know it's always nerve-wracking to do a live demo, but you did well. Awesome. So, okay, we went through quite a bit, but really the key takeaway, if you only remember one slide, this is the slide you need to remember. The 2 commands, convert to delta and shallow clone, and 7 keywords, convert to delta, create table, shallow clone. All right, so this is a key takeaway. And I do want to remind everyone that there are a lot of exciting Delta feature breakout session tomorrow, and also keynotes. Watch out for the keynotes tomorrow by Michael Armbrust on Delta Lake. And we also have Himanshu and Surrey talking about Delta Lake and Lakehouse roadmap, and also managed Delta table features. So definitely encourage everyone to watch out these features. And also check out the Adobe session at 2:30, and they actually talk about the update after 1 year. Okay, thank you.